You make this.
Well, good morning, everyone. This is Felicia Mariani, the Chief Executive of VTIC, and I'm pleased to be here today to bring you yet another episode of our webinar series. And today we're very pleased to have with us representatives from Victoria University to talk with us about their new School for the Visitor Economy. For those of you that attended our forum back on the 26th of February, you might recall that the Vice Chancellor of VU actually officially launched the School for the Visitor Economy that day. And we promised that we would be giving you a lot more detail on how this works and why it's so important for us. So today is our first step in giving you a peek into the workings of the new school and why it's actually such a critical piece of our future as far as the tourism industry is concerned. So I have with me here this morning Dr. Joanne Pike, who is the director at the School for the Visitor Economy. And I also have Barry Bruins, who is the industry engagement representative at the university. And I might let the two of them now just do a quick little intro and talk a bit about your connection to the school.
Okay. Hi, Felicia. Thanks for that intro. As you said, I'm the director for the School of the Visitor Economy, and we'll call that SVE from now on because it's a long title. I started in this role in October last year. And I work across the university to build and promote our education, training and research efforts around the visitor economy. So I work across all divisions, our TAFE sector or VU Polytechnic, higher education and also our research divisions. But I also work with an industry advisory board as well as across the university working group to build up our programs and our presence in the area.
And you also sit on our Tourism Services and Hospitality Policy Committee, let us not forget that. And Barry, just a quick intro on, I know you're famous within our industry, but I think for those of you who may not know Barry, talk a little bit about it.
Thanks very much, Felicia. That's lovely. Just a bit of background broadly. My role deals with work integrated learning and our students and graduates transition to careers in the industry. And of course, that takes me into the space of industry engagement, participation with VTIC and a number of other industry bodies. And I've been fortunate to see thousands of our graduates literally around Melbourne, Australia and globally performing some great roles within the industry. And that's been a great honour to do that for some time now. Thanks very much.
Yeah, it's been such a stalwart and a great support for us and for the industry, Barry. So thank you. So let's kick off and get our conversation started. I think probably the key question on everyone's mind today is why has Victoria University created the School for the Visitor Economy, and what actually makes this different from the other tourism and hospitality courses and schools that are already in existence?
Okay.
Joe, do you want to start with that?
Sure. I guess most of our listeners would know that Victoria University's got a very long history in tourism, hospitality and education. In this space, I think we were perhaps the first institution to set up courses in tourism in the 1970s. But really the school has been set up to recalibrate our offerings in that area and to build our programs and our research agenda. But really it's in response to the projected growth in the visitor economy. Yeah. And everyone knows that the visitor economy is outpacing other sectors. It's expected to grow 31% over a 10-year period up until 2026, and all sort of projections are being over-realised in the last 5 or so years. But in Victoria, we've got a growth of 8.6% per year, with expenditure of around 28.2 billion. That was the last figure that I read.
I think that's actually it's actually good to stop a moment and recognise that, because I think it is it's a critically important but unrealised truth about our sector, and I think people appreciate how important we are and what contribution we actually make to the economy of the state and indeed the country. I also just realized as Joe was talking to our listeners on the, I was going to say on the phone right now, but that's not right, online right now, it was remiss of me not to mention that of course you can ask questions by, kind of blogging in your questions. So please feel free throughout our time today to interject your questions, and we'll be more than happy to incorporate those into some of our discussion today. So apologies for neglecting to mention that at the beginning. Sorry, Joe, do you want to carry on there?
Well, I suppose the next thing to say is about this growth is that as a service industry, it's the sector generates employment at a much greater rate than other industries, and so according to a recent TTF, or Tourism and Transport Forum report, for every $1 million of tourism consumption, 7 jobs are created. So if you extrapolate that out, that's a lot of jobs to be created between now and 2026, and we've got shortfalls. In Victoria, we have something like 214,000 jobs at the moment, but it's predicted that by 2025 there'll be 100,000 more jobs. So that's 20,000 a year.
That's right, it's very challenging. And we're struggling to keep up with what we have now. So the idea of 20,000 more workers every year here in the state is it's almost a monumental task for us. I guess one of the key things for us is in building, a skilled and capable and qualified workforce. That keeps coming up time and time again in all the discussions and surveys, everything we do with our industry and our members. It's just absolutely tops the list. But even more so, we're finding, particularly in our regional areas across the state, that this is problematic. Are you finding that as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's emerging. I mean, there's a bit of, we'll talk about research later, but there's a bit of research that are coming through that are seeing some particular skills gaps, and those are some of the really basic things, like cleaners. It's hard to employ cleaners in regional areas for lots of reasons, but there's also emerging skill gaps that are being created as visitation increases. So, for example, some of our new iconic walks in the state are having a greater international visitation, and there's a greater demand for tour operations in those areas. So in ways that there may not have been a demand for in the past, but things like tour guiding on some of the bushwalking areas is becoming a demand, and there just isn't the supply there to absorb that demand. So I think that's the kind of thing that's going to prevent the potential, the growth potential from being realised if we don't meet those employment
Well, especially too when you think about how much we're currently investing in the development of some of these assets. So, for example, you were talking about, some of the walks, the Grampians Peaks Trail, which we were just fortunate enough last month to go up and have a little sneak peek of some of the walk. That will be an incredible draw card for tourists from right around the globe who are passionate about experiencing these new walks. But you're absolutely right. They are expecting to have guided opportunities. Many of them need those guides to be in language. So we have a lot of challenges that are confronting us as we not only try to meet the general demand, but also meet the specifics of how we're creating new experiences right across the state. So really good point for us to think about.
If I might, if that's okay, to jump in just again back to the School of the Visitor Economy and what does differentiate us as I believe, unique in Australia, having offerings all the way from a Certificate 2 up to a PhD. There's a long way in between those, but certainly at the Certificate 2 level, across a range of skills and technical requirements, some of those you've alluded to already, but of course including commercial cookery, hospitality, travel and tourism, all the way through to diplomas, associate degrees, bachelor's degrees, masters. So there's a lot of words and it's probably a lot of years in between a Certificate 2 and a PhD, but I just wanted to stress that to show you the breadth of the course offerings within that school, within our School of the Visitor Economy, but importantly also the ability for students or people to come into those courses at different entrance points and exit with different qualifications. So you certainly wouldn't expect someone to go all the way from a Cert 2 to a PhD, but okay, why not? Could happen. We better find that first person to do that.
Mary, can you just explain a little bit, like what does, just in terms of that in and out, how could that work? So I could come in, basically what you're saying is I could come in and do some technical kind of TAFE training, but then at the same time decide maybe that I'd like to get a more qualified accreditation in something more specific to my field of expertise, and kind of opening that. Because I think that's a really important point for us to understand as an industry.
Absolutely.
I coined a bit of a phrase in our discussions before around the idea of modularity. But I think if we think about how young people look at careers these days, and it's getting harder and harder to get people to commit to a chunk of 4 years of their lives.
Absolutely.
I think this kind of idea that you noted about dropping in and out, it's actually quite crucial to us adjusting to a changing behaviour.
Certainly for the youth as they are today, and perhaps thinking about a shorter block or a module that they might participate in and come away with a qualification that is a certificate, but potentially use that credit, if you will, as advanced standing towards another qualification. And that might be a few years later, so it doesn't have to be a roll-on. Students can enter and exit with just that short qualification. Even to some of the postgraduate levels, there are opportunities to do that.
Yeah. I think what it means also is that we can offer something to a lot of different groups, so not just school leavers and young people, but those who've been working in the industry for a long time and want to upskill, or those who want to transfer their skills into the visitor economy, or those who want practical skills on top of their higher qualifications. So we know that in some sectors, people come into the visitor economy with really diverse backgrounds. So somebody might come in from the legal profession, for example.
Yeah.
So they're highly skilled in, interpreting contracts and managing those aspects of their business, but they might not have more basic financial management skills, for example. And they need to, and increasingly, I guess, digital skills are what people are looking for. Yeah. So e-marketing, how to run a social media campaign, those kind of skills.
They are really crucial. Digital is absolutely crucial.
Perhaps a quick one, and it's something that, as you say, mature age entrants can consider. May have a bachelor's or a master's, but recognise that within their role in the profession, they do need to perhaps top up with a more technical skill. So that reverse or articulation, perhaps to pick up a certificate. There might be a GDS course or a tourism training course that does provide some technical skills that a manager may not have, or it might be in a different field altogether. So those options need to play into the mind and the behaviours of the youth these days.
Yeah, that's a good point. We have a question from Alicia. Hi, Alicia. She'd like to know, will the School for the Visitor Economy look to create workplace learning programs and platforms as well? Barry, do you want to take that one?
Oh, right, certainly right up my alley and jumps ahead, absolutely. Certainly workplace learning has been an essential and differentiating factor of all of Victoria University's courses since we commenced in the hospitality space in the 60s, a long, long time ago. No, I wasn't there then, but there has always been an industrial training, a work integrated learning, a cooperative education, internship. Doesn't matter what the label is, but emphasising the need to get practical workplace experience as part of the course is essential, and certainly very much my core duty in liaising with industry. So I'm not sure if that answers your question directly, but all of the courses from the vocational even to the higher ed now, our master's course offers an internship subject, allowing participants in that course to gain experience at a higher level, perhaps working at a project, even for Felicia at VTIC or another industry stalwart. So yes.
I think that's important, and that's a crucial place where we probably need to get better as industry in engaging in some of that. I mean, I've seen this again all over the country in every state that I've worked in, that it does become an issue that while we've got all these shortages, we're not necessarily engaging with all the channels of opportunities to try and fill some of those gaps. We're going to talk in a little bit later, but I think because we do tend to think about permanent, and I know, Barry, a bit later on, you're going to talk a little bit about the importance of changing that and really thinking about not necessarily always the permanent placement. But before we move into that, what I'd like to probably turn our attention now to is talking a little bit about from your experience, your research, all of the stuff that you're going through in formulating the school, what have you seen as the skills that our sector needs to really develop in order to answer some of the increasing in demand that we're expecting?
I might take that one, Felicia, but I suppose before we answer that, I think one of the things that is that our detailed knowledge of skills gaps and labour shortages is incomplete. We've got a number of regional studies. We've got some sectoral studies. I don't know how comprehensive it is though, and I think that we need to refine how we understand skill shortages and what the kind of gaps are. They're more consistent.
Yeah, because just in that point, I think it's important because that's a really, really valid point that I know we've got a lot of, we've had a lot of work that's been done in regional areas and investment made in skills gaps in a region. But I think what you're talking about there is no one's rolling that up into a bigger, what does that look like for the state and indeed the country?
Yeah, for the country and also for our international region as well, because there's a lot of mobility, increasing mobility, and particularly in regional areas, people are becoming reliant on temporary labour, whether they be backpackers or international students and so on. So I think we need to kind of think about our place in the Asia Pacific region as well. But I suppose, having said that we need more knowledge, we do know two things very clearly. One is that when you talk to industry, and the research is totally consistent on this, is that they have trouble filling vacancies, and that varies, and that problem's probably worse in regional areas, which is the second thing that we know, in that the regions are impacted by a bunch of barriers to recruiting and retaining employees. So seasonality, being in remote locations, transport issues, and increasingly accommodation shortages for employees are a problem within the regions.
That's a really good point, and we're hearing that a lot. We've got another question that's come in we'll go to in just a moment, Catherine, but I think the one point you talk about with accommodation, we're also seeing that increasingly, if you create experiences in regional areas, many operators are actually having to build accommodation for staff because they simply can't find the housing availability to be able to support the staff in the region. So it's becoming a complex social issue almost as well. I just want to turn to Catherine's question. Hi, Catherine. And Catherine's asking, what does VU offer at the moment in terms of upskilling for staff who are already in our industry? Some of that probably exists through the new school, but probably some exist through what you've already got in the curriculum across VU.
Yeah. I guess a point of difference about the school is that I think we're the only ones in Australia that are operationalising the concept of the visitor economy. So we're talking about recognising that the industry needs all sorts of skills beyond the actual specialist skills in tourism, hospitality and events. Important as they are, we also need a whole range of other skills from across our marketing, accounting, even creative arts, food science, so on and so on. So that's an important feature of our school. And just an example is we're forming research teams at the moment with some of our experts in artificial intelligence to look at how we might harness and interpret data so that we can inform tourism investors and policymakers more clearly about what some of the future trends might be, which is just an example. But to answer your question specifically, it depends on what you need. So what we're saying is we've got programs from Certificate 2 through to PhD, as Barry explained. We can mix those programs up from within the College of Business. We can also customise our training offerings to particular sectors as well, which we've done quite widely actually. So I guess the answer to the question is it depends what you need. And we're really open to discussing it. And, yeah.
But I mean, of course, I think there are, within the existing school, across the tourism and hospitality sector, the curriculum that already exists. But then, of course, there are, there are other courses around just general business skills as well, which every business needs, whether you're a tourism business or, manufacturing widgets. The reality is you need the core-based general business skills first. And I think probably, Catherine, to your point, training up our employees within the sector, it's important for the business owner to have those skills, but it's also important for us to train up our staff so that they have those skills as well going forward. There's also another question that's just come up from, is it Shona or Shona? I'm sorry if I'm not saying it correctly. Will there be programs at VU offered online, webinars, etc., in order to support those in the program?
Increasingly, our programs are using blended learning models, so students can participate in our programs remotely. Again, there's a really wide range, and I was going to wait to the end to talk about this, but we do have our web page which lists all of our courses, and you can dig down into each of the courses and look at the content and delivery style. But again, we've been doing some training for the hotel sector where we actually go out to them and have combine a whole series of learning modes, including online and workshop sessions as well, where people do come together, which is quite valuable. But we also have an MBA online that's in development right at the moment, so that's quite applicable to the industry. And people can choose specialisation subjects in tourism and destination management to combine with a broader MBA program.
I know in some of our conversations leading into this, we were also talking about, you mentioned before, Joe, the APEC report, which you're going to have to define that one for me because I can't remember what that stands for. But I thought there were some really interesting learnings that came from that report that might be worth sharing.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So this report came out in 2017, and it's the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum.
Thank you for that.
Which is APEC, and it was a comprehensive study of skills and labour shortages in the APEC region. So I think there's about a dozen countries that are involved, both developed and developing countries. And what they did, which I think is really useful, is to apply a skills framework, which is, I think, much more useful than looking at job titles because of the changing nature of work, in work generally, but in the visitor economy in particular. But that particular framework identifies 4 and an additional category of skill that are in demand in the visitor economy. So those are, first of all, hard skills. So things like being a chef or a pilot or a sommelier. Sommelier? Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Wellness industry skills like yoga teaching, for example. There's a demand for those kind of skills. And so in that hard skills category, we know that there are shortages. So chefs, there are shortages. One thing that's coming up at the moment is the need for staff to have wine knowledge, and there's a real shortage of.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah.
So the second category, and this is obvious, is digital skills, and that's I think really important for the industry. So that's things like being able to run accounting software or airline travel systems, but e-marketing and social media is a really big category of skill. The third category is soft skills, and this is what employers consistently ask for and find lacking. So those soft skills are languages, increasingly important, service skills, presentation, capacity to work with others. And it's all those kind of skills that often aren't considered a skill, are kind of invisible, but it's like, it's attitude, I think. And so people are looking for the right attitude.
Yeah, it's a little bit harder to learn that stuff. It's almost like an innate kind of thing.
Well, it is, yeah.
Languages, no, not so much, but.
Employers have always told us, if I might just quickly jump in then, that the technical skills are not necessarily the critical factors in their recruiting decisions. It's very much more about the soft skills, the personality, the passion for the industry. And that's something we might turn to a little bit later, but it fits this definition of skills quite cleanly as well.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. And I keep remembering several years back now, I remember talking to a colleague that was at Virgin Australia, and they actually said that in the first 3 interviews, they don't talk anything about the technical skills at all. It's all around trying to understand if you're a good fit for the organization.
Absolutely.
You know, culturally, values-wise. You know, that's the first 3 interviews before you actually get into something where they actually want to know about your skills in the particular area that you're coming into. So quite interesting, because as I say, those are kind of the things that you can't really learn.
Absolutely.
They are more about who you are and how you present yourself. So yeah, it's fascinating.
And that's a debate as to whether you can learn them.
True.
And so I think you can unpack some behaviours in there that people can become aware of.
Interesting.
The 4th category is obviously is what we know is those business skills, so management, planning, finance, problem solving, strategic planning. So that's the 4th area. But they also add the 5th category, which is entrepreneurial skills. And I guess given that the structure of the industry means that more than 80% of the industry is made up of small to medium enterprises, those kind of skills are also very important.
That's a really good point. Yeah, that creativity space almost. Yeah, it's really interesting.
And perhaps going back to the 100,000 jobs that we need, necessary and important to emphasise the breadth of skills required, and that there isn't a single solution in the population necessary that we're trying to attract into the industry.
That's a good point there. So, if we are such a growth industry, which clearly we are, why are we still finding it so hard to attract people to our sector and fill some of those gaps?
Really good point, and a bit of a conundrum, certainly. And a lot of it comes down to the perception of the industry and career paths within the industry. I don't believe that it has the same cash and value that it did perhaps a decade or 2 ago. And we're not seeing the number of young people as excited about the industry. And to some degree, that comes down to how we define the roles in the industry, how we describe them, the level of professionalism, the broad and longer term career paths that are possible. So I think that's really important point to stress here, that it comes down to all of us to talk about the industry and the professional roles in a more sophisticated, if you will, manner to be the attractive industry that we know it should be. There's also another key point here is about attracting candidates from outside of the sector within the educational field. Certainly there are students in arts, students in science, in engineering, in sports, that would have the right skill sets to come into and take on critical roles within the sector. So it's a little bit a matter of growing the pie and not just competitively targeting a pre-existing pie of the labour market. And that's something that we need to talk about more, is about economic development as a career path, strategic marketing, IT web specialists, logistics specialists that the industry could certainly tap into to build that, again, that 100,000 new jobs in the next 4 or 5 years, to draw from outside of the traditional field. So yes, it's a matter of making the existing fields more attractive, using the terminology that's going to attract the candidates, but also thinking outside that existing pool and bringing more into the field. As you alluded to earlier, it's not just about permanent full-time jobs. I think some of the stats I've seen are that already half of the positions are part-time or casual, and half only are about full-time. So probably a couple of percentage points up or down there, but important to recognise that yes, the youth of today is certainly looking for some flexibility, looking for career paths, looking for professional roles ability to come in and out perhaps. But going back to that first point, stressing the professionalism of the industry. So there shouldn't just be a casual uni job for the young people today. We should be able to convince them to convert that into a career path. And it's not just a uni job. Hate that word just, too many people are using it. So many other great longer term opportunities within that.
Yeah, well, indeed, I mean, I think, and I've said this before, that, you know, all the people having been in this sector for a couple of decades now, people stay in this industry because it is a really fulfilling career. And
fun, lots of fun.
That's right. And somehow we need to find a way to better communicate that. I mean, I've often said that as an industry filled with communications experts, we've done a really poor job of communicating our industry. So, but you raised a really interesting point there, Barry, because I do think that we tend to think about people in the tourism and hospitality
and events.
Stream and events, exactly. But what was really eye-opening for me, we of course do our Student Entrepreneurial Award, which we launched last year at the conference, and I was fortunate enough to judge the finalists for the VU entrant. And what amazed me was there were 20-odd young students in the room who absolutely nailed the issues confronting our industry. But I think there were only 3 or 4 of them that were actually studying a degree in tourism hospitality. Most of them were studying marketing or logistics or law or all sorts of other bits and bobs. But they came together and they had to go away and they had to research our industry and discover or unearth what they thought the problem was and create a solution. And it was amazing how they absolutely nailed the industry and or the issues confronting the industry, I should say. And staying on afterward and talking with them, the one comment I made to them was, keep studying what you're studying, get your degree in anything that you want, but just make sure that you put tourism and events in your frame of reference, if you will, or in your selection set of the industries that you want to seek out a career in. You know, at the end of the day, you know, we probably surveyed all of us out there, a small percentage that probably actually do have specialization in tourism and hospitality, and much more that we've got more generalist degrees that we've applied to our industry.
And that's the differentiation between an industry sector that we're teaching and describing versus the discipline ranges that are very, very broad, marketing or finance or logistics or research analysis. So certainly combining the two, and I've got some great case studies and examples, and I hope Christy doesn't mind me mentioning her, but after completing a bachelor's degree in tourism and being in the industry for some time, recognized that her passion was with people and culture. So she came back and did a human resource management degree. And now she's a talent and culture manager for Accor Hotels, contributed to the tourism excellence with VTIC, and is very much recognized within the accommodation sector, pulling together the talent and culture roles as from that human resource management qualification and the studies and the knowledge of the industry, tourism and hospitality as it was at the time. So some great examples there. Jen, who completed an advanced diploma of hospitality, recognized that she wanted to be a trainer and a teacher and a leader, a people person. So completed a certificate 4 in training and assessment. Of course, all of these qualifications were at VU. I shouldn't have to mention that. But Jen did an excellent job and now is a hotel manager with the Adina Hotel Group in Melbourne, part of the TFE group. So there's some excellent examples out there of exactly what we're talking about, but we need more of it.
Yeah, you're so right, Barry. You are so right. So if we try to answer that, great segue to the next question. What steps can we take? Particularly, I'm really interested in understanding, and I'm sure people on the phone want to know, as individual industry operators, what are the steps that we can take to start to try to address some of this dilemma? Because if we've got to find 20,000 people a year, we need to get our skates on.
Well, I guess to start off, and I'll wear my researcher's hat here, but I do think we need better and more consistent definition of what our skill requirements are. Yeah. I mean, some of the barriers or the issues that we're facing are structural, and they're shaping the future of work. So they're things like changing demographics. We have an aging population. We have trends in mobility where young people are moving to the cities, so they're not available for working regions. And there's, of course, changing skills requirements. So developments in robotics, for example, are going to have enormous impacts on what kind of skills we need. So driverless cars, for example, is perhaps an obvious one. So I think we really need to refine how we understand skills and predict where those demand might be into the future.
Yeah. Those are actually really, I mean, some of those areas you've highlighted just now, Joe, I know we talk about it and it's starting to get into the vernacular of the industry around what does, all of this change in technology mean, but I don't think we're certainly focused on how we can actually deal with some of this, because that's going to change our industry dramatically, and this isn't 10 years away, this stuff's here now, so we need to start to think about. What is going through my mind though is that this does sound like a great collaborative project for SVE and the industry, and I think that's something, we'll take that a bit offline, but I do think that that is a piece of work that I'm sure many people on the telephone would love. I keep saying telephone, sorry.
Yeah.
Many people online would actually probably have first of all, great contribution to make in that space, but also a great interest in contributing to something like this, because what we're talking about here is really reimagining how we think about skills in our sector. So I think those are some really, really salient points that you've raised there, Joe.
If I might jump in there, mentioned earlier about building the number of entrants to the industry, but just as important is the retention factor and keeping our participants within the sector broadly, recognising the range of segments of the industry, but also I think a little bit it behooves all of us to talk about the professionalism of the role, and to make sure that we think long term about the return of our investment in the human resources, make sure that there is staff satisfaction, that there is an interest in a longer term career path, and that longer term perspective is important to build that retention and ensure that we keep stayers in the industry, whether they have to cross companies or cross sectors. There are a few key employers out there that I know encourage the young people to get out from their own organisation and further their career path if there aren't upward mobility opportunities. And we've got to recognise many of you are small, very small micro and medium enterprises, and there isn't always that wonderful longer term career path, the stepping stones for every individual. So, but recognising to keep some of those excellent candidates on the books is really, really important perspective to have that long term, as I said.
On a related point, Barry, and I mentioned the APEC report, but one of their recommendations was for employers to lift their visibility as being a good employer, because really organisations are competing for talent out there, and so one of the strategies they suggest is we should be developing an industry of choice charter to highlight. To kind of address some of the perceptions that the industry is all about long hours and low pay. Misperceptions. And to profile, I guess, many of the good practices that are emerging from a lot of organisations.
That's a really interesting one, because we think about employer of choice, but that's the first time I've heard the terminology industry of choice. It really is interesting. I like that idea. And really, it is this, I keep talking about myth busting, because what you've said there about misperception rather than perception, our industry is plagued with it. So how do we start to develop up this industry of choice charter? How do we start to promote ourselves as a great industry, not just a good employer? That's a whole different level, really fascinating.
And perhaps to jump in there a little bit about that is about reframing the nature of the jobs that we're advertising, the job titles, to address this dilemma. Instead of baristas and reservations agents, certainly there's opportunity to promote economic development roles, strategic marketing, as I mentioned earlier, and some of the higher level skills that are required, and that certainly can also help to change the perception. But I wanted to introduce another factor here, and I'm not sure if this is the right place, but recognising also how youth look for jobs. What kind of filters are they putting on the search engines or their own job searches? They're probably not looking for the key terms that we might be using. So we do need to understand the youth market and properly structure the job opportunities, so we don't have 200 people that are just pushing the button on an online job opportunity, that really understand what is being required and what the longer term career prospects are within that role.
Isn't that interesting? One of the things I just wrote down when you said that, Barry, was search engine optimization.
There we go.
You know, I mean, we're all really good at keyword searches when it comes to selling our business.
Yep.
We do that as part of every day.
Yep.
It's crucial. It's what, you know, affects our bottom line. But we haven't applied that principle to keyword searches for employment. What an interesting way to think about it. Just another, I guess this one to me I think is really important because, as you said rightfully, Barry, most of our businesses in the sector are micro businesses and small and medium enterprises. So what kind of support is out there? This is a really complex world to navigate for, you know, big companies, let alone a small business owner. So, you know, is there support out there for some of our operators to assist them in navigating this this kind of world of operating a business in the tourism industry?
Well, one of the things I can certainly add to the discussion here is that I think it was Alicia that raised before about the workplace learning opportunities. So certainly, whether you're a single person operator or a small SME, there is the opportunity to bring in young people through a university or an institutional placement, and to make sure that you can bring people in and give them some expose. No, they're not going to run the company, they're not going to want to take it over in day one, but they are going to want to learn from you and absorb what you have to offer within that business structure. Of course, there's the opportunity to bring the young people on as an internship. Doesn't need to be paid as long as it's a vocational placement and it meets the Fair Work Office requirements. That is, it's a part of a student's course. So of course, all of our courses, from the certificate up to the masters, as I mentioned before, include a workplace learning option that allows individuals to come into your firm, again, whatever size it might be, on a learning basis as an internship that doesn't need to be paid as part of their university learning or their Victoria University Polytechnic learning. So that's certainly one great opportunity that we can put out there to all of the SMEs and hopefully give our students some experience, and who knows what they might be in the future.
So Mary, if they want to get involved with that, how would the industry connect with VU in that space? What's the easiest way to do that? In terms of the internship program, can you somehow express interest, or how does that happen? Absolutely.
So certainly through the SVE, the School of Visitor Economy, SVE at vu.edu.au is one way. Through our web portal, I believe there's a EOI option, and without drop being too obvious on the website. Joe, help me, that's www. something or other, I'm sure.
I won't find out, but
okay.
if you search for Victoria University School for the Visitor Economy, it will come up. We also have an email address that would come through to me and colleagues, which is sve.vu.edu.au. But our webpage includes all of our courses that you can explore, and you can dig quite deeply into the modes of delivery and what the prerequisites are and what's involved. I'd also encourage people to look more widely as well, and look at related courses which satisfy their own particular needs in their business. But we're certainly really open to discussion about what those needs are, because I think everything we've discussed so far says that things are changing pretty quickly and people need different things. So we want to be at the forefront of that and be responsive to the workplace needs of the future.
Yeah, so, absolutely. Yeah.
And I think you mentioned earlier a lot of the courses outside.
Yeah, there's, you know, I think in terms of small business, and if we just go back to the general business skills that we all need to operate under, you know, there are a lot of resources that are available even through government. And if you take a look at, you know, Small Business Victoria, there's resources on there to develop up a business plan. There's resources to help with risk management plans, marketing plans. All of those things are available just generally on their website that you can download, and, you know, you get a great sort of pro forma in putting that together. I think probably we might wrap it up there. We've covered a whole lot of territory, but I think, you know, hopefully what it's done is to enlighten some of our listeners about what's available, what's out there, and what SVE will mean for our industry going forward. I think the important thing I've taken out of this is that we actually need to get engaged as an industry. I think, you know, this is but one resource. There are many out there, and we've got to get better at uncovering those resources and then making the connections with our industry to be able to leverage them. That's always the big channel, or the big challenge, I should say. Just wanted to touch base quickly in terms of our next webinar. Well, we're getting back into the tourism awards season, ladies and gentlemen. So we're actually going to be dedicating the next couple of webinar periods to a special program we're developing this year with our friends at WebFirm. We're actually going to be throughout May and June covering off 5 awards segments in a webinar tutorial, basically. And of course, that webinar then will be available online, as is all of our webinars. You just go on to the VTIC website, onto our YouTube channel, and you'll be able to find all of the webinars that we do, including this one. But I think with the Tourism Awards, this is something new we've not done before. And what we're doing is trying to highlight the various segments of questions that need to be answered in making your submission. And we're going to have experts giving you some tips and tricks and hopefully some real insight on taking some of the challenge out of putting a submission together, but also some of the fear. I know a lot of people don't do it because there is this concern about how hard it may or may not be. So hopefully we want to smooth out that process and make it happen easier for you. The dates are actually now up on our website. So if you are to go onto the VTIC website, you'll be able to see the dates through May and part of June that we'll be covering off these webinars. So hopefully we'll see many of you tuning in, because we're hopeful that we're going to have a lot of people putting forward submissions for this year's awards. And lastly, I would like to thank, of course, our partners, WebFirm, in continually, they have for a long time now supported our delivery of these webinars, and they've been a great partner for VTIC, and we are incredibly grateful for their support and for their ongoing partnership with us. So a big thank you to the team at WebFirm. Thanks, Barrett. And a big thank you, of course, to our guests today from Victoria University. It's been a pleasure. We see Joe and Barry a lot, and it's just great that we can have a chance like this to have a chat and hopefully impart some key information about such an exciting new development at the university. So thank you all for being with us today, and hopefully we might progress some of these ideas in terms of how we can collaborate on some of the research projects in particular. But yeah, we'll see you all again when we do our Tourism Awards webinar. So well done. Thank you.
Thanks, Felicia, Joe.